Okay, let's take a look and see what we're going to do for this demo. It will be an acrylic painting of this snowy egret. Now, I photographed all these shots down at Chincoteague National Wildlife Refuge in Virginia. I like to work only for my own photographs because I know what's going on with the photos, and I often photograph animals knowing that I want to make a painting out of it, so I have specific ideas in mind at the time I shoot it. Meaning that I sometimes or often don't stray away from the original photograph because there's no need to. I had what I want to do as a painting in mind when I shot it. Now, for this particular photograph, I'm going to do a 16 by 20. That's what we will do for this demo. But the 16 by 20 is actually a 4:5 aspect ratio. That means that the common number is 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 5 is 20. Whereas the 35 millimeter is actually a 2:3 aspect ratio. Where, for example, this should actually be a 16 by 24. Then the common number would be 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. Now, what I did was I just chopped off a little bit of the left side and I placed my bird in the photo knowing that I wanted everything on the right hand side exactly where it was to paint from, knowing that I would only be eliminating just typical light gray background. Now, being that I shot this with a 70-200 lens, this bird was only about 15 feet away. And that is important to know only because the depth of field with a telephoto that close is extremely shallow. So everything is blown out of focus and it's just a soft background. Now that will work good for this particular painting because that's all I want as a background for this painting. But now the top of it is somewhat dark, but that's actually a distant shoreline that I'll show you later. But for the painting's sake, I also want the background to be darker on top. Also, this is not an HDR photo, which means it does make a difference. The black is a lot darker than it really would be if you would be there looking at the bird. Why is that? Well, the reason is your eyes can adjust to distance and the amount of light instantly, where a camera lens has to be set to one setting or another. If I set it for the bird and close it down a little bit, then that means my beak might be too dark. If I expose for the beak and allow enough light to come in to properly expose the beak, which is a black backlit object, then my feathers and my bird itself might be totally blown out and overexposed. So what I did was I took the same shot and I overexposed it just to get some detail out of that beak. That's what I'll be using once I do the beak, this particular photo. This will be for the beak only. Now moving on to the next photo, this particular picture right here is showing that there are actually a part down the middle of the neck that there's plumes on this side and plumes on that side. And that is what we're seeing in this picture right here. These are the plumes that are actually on the right-hand side of the neck. And then the left-hand side over here is all of these right here. They're fluffed out, but they're actually more or less fluffed out right at you because of the way the bird is looking. Now, I like to know all these things of what's going on just so I can accurately paint something and be confident that I have enough information to finish the painting. This is going to be our last photo that we're going to look at, and this is only at about 100 millimeter. So now you could see that the depth of field is much more forgiving, meaning that we can now see our distant shoreline, and that is why the top of the photo is a little bit darker on our very first photo, this one right here. So this dark area up in here is actually just the shoreline in the background. But we will make it darker just so we can portray our rim lighting at its best. Let's go ahead and move to the drawing board and get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. This is what happens if you put graphite paper down on the gesso that's still a little bit damp. I went ahead and sanded and prepped this panel, but I didn't wait long enough for it to dry, so the graphite paper really stuck to it every fingerprint I made. I'm going to go ahead and start. We'll start with the dark gray up here. Remember, pre-mixed colors, it always gives you a starting point. That way, if I start painting my dark gray, it will always be that exact same color. So if I want to bring in dark gray back into it to start blending down, then I'll know that these two colors will match exactly because I'm starting with the exact gray I had before. So if you want to make a nicer transition or a real smooth gradation, having pre-mixed colors will help you a lot. And then it'll also give you a starting point that if this is my light gray and I want to go even lighter yet, then I could just take some of this out and add a little bit of white to it, and then I'll even be able to go lighter yet. Let's go ahead and get started. Now this will take at least 3, possibly 4 coats, so I never get too excited about the first one. It will slide around and get pretty streaky because this is a very smooth surface that I'm working on, and for that reason it's going to look pretty splotchy. And I'm just taking it right out of the jar of the pre-mixed color like so, and we'll get this color grade down to where we're going to start making our transition to the lighter gray. And I can even talk and chat knowing that I'm going to pick up exactly with the same color that I have pre-mixed. So I'm going to have a softer edge around the bird, especially down in here. And then down here, I'll have to make the transitions gray here too, because these are going to be feathers sticking out from the bird. So there will be background color behind them. So I want to include that also. But I'll be able to, I have white transfer paper also, graphite paper. Well, I can even go back over the bird after I'm done with the background and redraw in my lines if I need the edges. I just always use pencil. For those who like to paint as they go, that's fine. Do whatever works for you. I've been doing this particular system since I was in school back in the 80s, so I'm not going to probably change anytime soon. I can even take this further down to where I want my transition to go, because then all I have to do is go back and re-wet it with the same color. But it will take several coats, no matter what we do. And then you got to leave them dry good, just like watercolors, otherwise you'll be pushing around this coat and smudging it pretty bad. You'll dig it down back to the gesso, the white background. Then what I'll do is just start the transition using a number 16 filbert. These are only nylon brushes, fairly inexpensive, but I do like them. Okay, we'll start the transition. Now what I'm going to do is mix a little bit of them together just to help me out, so I don't try and take one straight to the other. I'll mix them a little bit, as much as I can. Okay, that's all we're going to do on that side. And we'll see, we might not even need a sponge, but we'll see. Sometimes the painterly effect looks nice too. And again, I'm going to paint over these feathers because they are going to be fairly thin. You'll be able to see the background color. This is still the dark. Need a little bit of water. I'll just go straight to that lighter gray. This coat will get pretty well covered up completely by the time I'm on my third or fourth coat. Depends on how thin you watered them down. A little bit of matte medium or gloss medium, whatever you want to use. Brush strokes will disappear too as I keep covering it with the exact same color. And then of course, if you want to make it a little bit on the graphic side, you can make the entire background the exact same color, which will help you out a lot because there won't be any blending. When you start blending in the bird, you do tiny areas at a time. It's a lot easier to blend then than much bigger areas. We'll let that dry and we'll go ahead and start a second coat. Okay, I hit it with the hair dryer. It should be ready to go. I'm going to start up in here, just maybe the first couple inches, with just a little wee bit of a darker gray mixed in. And I'll do that right here so you can see. This will be a little bit darker. This will be a mixed color, so I'll have to be careful. Kind of take the same amount on the brush. Helps out a little bit. That's straightening up the brush marks already. That's darker. I think it'll be a little bit better. It'll really show off that backlighting. I'm just going to get just a preliminary mix here. Again, I don't want no real hard straight lines around the bird, or I'll have a hard time painting it out with fuzzy feathers. Okay, we'll let that go over there. Mix up a little wee bit more, half and half. That's pretty close. Because again, it'll darken a little bit. I'll just get this re-wet across here. And then take my medium gray into it. Take the medium gray down into here. Then go into my light gray. Throat's pretty raw these days. This is where the pre-mixed comes in handy. Then I could just add colors to it. Take it down to just straight color right out of the jar. But I'm also covering up my brush strokes. Okay, we'll let that dry. Okay, I try to get rid of some of the light glare and readjusted my light. I'll see if that works a little bit better. But we're going to go ahead and start our first layer of sponge. And I'm just going to use just a natural sponge this time. Pick out a side that I like, and then I'm just going to keep daubing it and working the paint in together, and that will blend it when it's wet. Okay, we'll let that dry and see what we got. Remember, when it gets streaky up in here and it looks a little bit lighter than it is, it will dry darker, and that's also the water that's making it look a little bit lighter than it is. But we'll give it one more coat and even this up, and that might be it. Okay, last coat, we're going to make this a little bit darker up here again. And I'll be mixing the paints. Okay, aside from the reflections, we're going to leave it dry, and we'll see what we got. We have a little bit of just color variances here and there going from dark to light. I don't really want an airbrush effect. Otherwise, I think I would just use an airbrush. That could be done. You thin out acrylics thin enough and they will cover and they will stay. But for now, we'll just leave this dry and then see what we have and go from there. Very lightly dusting it on. Very lightly. And that's pretty dark for our lighter areas, which will be nice. Okay, that's it. Okay, we'll let that dry. Still trying to see a lot of reflection. Okay, that's it. We'll let it dry. Okay, I went ahead and retraced my lines with the white graphite paper this time. And here is the beak. I will go ahead and do it. But then what I'm going to do first is white out my background colors and just start introducing the white back in, because I got to take it back to a good white. And then maybe even some unbleached titanium also. Just back in here, and even some yellows and whites. Real subtle. Let's go ahead and start that. I'll do that speed painting. Okay, unfortunately you missed the first coat because I forgot to hit record, but what I'm going to do is put down a gel layer. This would be for those folks who like to put down their gray shadowed areas first and then take glazes of color over top of them. That's what I'm doing now. I'm going to lighten up the background just a little bit. I do think it's a little bit too dark. I do like the light up against the dark, but I also don't want it to start to look like nighttime. It still has to look like a bright sunny day. So this way I'm going to lighten it up, but taking glazes over the gray will give my background much more depth than just a flat color. Let's go ahead and try some new washes. This is mixed down. I really can't give you the rate of mixing only because it's going to depend on how fast you want to change the value of the colors. So if you mix it down way thin, as far as with gel goes, matte medium, then the gel medium, then it's going to go on real thin, just like so. And you will be changing the value very subtly. And I don't mind brush strokes for this, very subtle ones. But I want to do this before I get too far with the bird, and then I could finish up my background. And the faster you work, the better. There are many different ways to do this. This is just one of them. But I like to take it a little bit at a time. I just feel more comfortable. Cross-hatching, crisscrossing, destroying the previous brush strokes. That really builds up depth. But the first coat that I did was pretty much exactly the same as this. I might even put one or two more on yet too, just to lighten it up and slowly eliminate brush strokes. Give it a nice glazing. This is a pretty floppy brush. I was debating on whether to use this brush or not. But it seems to be working okay as long as I take it down just a little bit at a time. And then I may actually go back in and just pick and choose where I put it, just to kind of subtly blend it together. But this will give me a painterly effect in the background, which was actually different than what I originally intended. But that's okay. We'll call it for demo's sake. And then, of course, doing something like this will also depend on how big you're working. If it's real big, it might be a little bit more of a challenge. If it's a smaller painting, that makes a big difference. Okay, we'll let that dry. That's changing things. Okay, next layer, I'm going to try and feather a little wee bit more right in here. I thought I was getting a hot spot for my light. Here, it turns out that it's actually just lighter. Okay, I'll let that dry. Okay, new brush. We're going to try it. Another coat. I'm going to give another coat across the top up in here. And then once that dries, I'm going to start feathering it back down again. I'm going to lighten this up a good bit, only because I think the beak will not be too noticeable at all if I leave it too dark. Okay, I'll let that dry. Okay, we're going to work our way up. Okay, we'll let that dry. Okay, I got this one done. It's fairly dry, but now what I'm going to do is a little bit of a twist. And what I'm going to do is take my bronze yellow and I mixed it down with the gel, water, and a little bit of matte medium. The gel is also a matte medium. And what I want to do is it's very thin. This is my test piece. You might barely be able to pick it up on the white paper, but then it's going over the blue. And I want it that thin only because what I'll do is take the first coat up to here, then here, then here, then here. Or if I want to make it splotchy, I could do whatever I want, but it'll be a lot easier to blend down to whatever color you have. And this is going to keep on building up complexity, layers, depth, the whole bit. But now instead of just having a light blue background with gray underneath it, I'm going to start introducing some new colors. And especially since there will be these bronzy yellow colors in the backlit bird, then I'll also put some of them very subtle in the background. Let's go ahead and do one coat and we'll feather it off into just up here on top, and that's it. Wait for that to dry. And then keep in mind, I could keep putting different layers, whatever I want. If I think this is going too light, then I can even mix up a gel of also just the darker gray and then go back over it and feather it down. As long as I keep them thinned down, then they're easier to control. If you try and gradate a real deep, opaque color to what is there, that is very difficult. Let's go ahead and do our bronze yellow. Now, you might barely be able to see it, but that's the whole idea. I could gradate it up into what's here with very little trace of a gradation mark. Then I'll do the same thing again, and you'll see as the third or fourth coat, these dry quick with a hair dryer, and third or fourth coat, you'll definitely start to see some yellow down here. We're just taking it nice and slow, building it up so it's more controllable the way we're doing it. Okay, just to show you how I mix this, I started one layer of the bronze yellow going up, but now I'm going to start also layers of cobalt blue coming down. I thought the blues would look nice, just more of like a sky type, water type blue. And then just to show you also just how to blend really thin layers of colors that they're so transparent that all of the layers will build up and make a difference. There's really great depth in what you can see when with this type of a just multiple layer of background. This is, I'm going to have my cobalt blue thin, and it is just gel. This is a 2-ounce jar, so it's about half full. So I will take my cobalt blue, and I'll just use a brush here to mix in. And all I'm going to do is just stick my brush handle in the jar, and that's how much blue I'm going to use. That's it. Now I'll put it in here and mix it up. And this is just straight cobalt blue. And for me, what I do, I will also put a little bit of matte medium in it. That'll counterbalance how much water I'm going to use. Just a squirt, just to thin it out. Make it a little bit more paintable. And mix it real good till it's kind of almost like a syrup, heavy syrup. And being that these are so transparent, you could mix colors. You could mix all your colors together to make a gel. You could mix different colors and then add them to a gel and apply it. But the point is, this is no more different than using multiple layers of watercolors. If I use a straight blue, straight yellow, straight orange, it is quite different than mixing all those 3 colors together and then putting them down. So what I'm trying to do is build up layers of multiple colors. So using a straight color, it's a corporate decision that I make. And that's it. I'll just roll that just like that. I just wipe that off, and that's ready to go. And again, I like to take the paint down just a little bit at a time. That makes it really easy to blend into what you got there, or to feather in some lighter areas and be able to make them a little bit darker if you have to. We're going to go ahead and start right up in here. And I'm going to mist it down just a little bit. So I'll be working for a little while. And it'll come out very subtle. That's okay, that's what I want, just a little bit at a time. If it's too thin, then just add a little bit more paint to it. But this is, you can see the blue going on, but building up in real subtle coats. You can see how much they're changing it when I take it over the white. I'll stop right there. And you can see it's taking it down very slowly, which is what I want. Much easier to control. You want to go faster, then just add a little bit more paint. But there's a lot of ways to blend colors with acrylics, but a lot of the demos I've seen are with small canvases. That's not bad when you're working with a small canvas. It's much easier, but when you start working with a bigger area or odd shaped spaces where you have to do this over here and then come back over and do this, anything like that, then that makes a difference. And what will happen is sometimes you have to change up your system a little bit when the area is much bigger that you have to cover. Okay, this time we'll take our yellow up and our blue back down, but you can see how quick it's building up, that the beak is pretty well getting covered, and it's lightening up a lot, so you can tell how much I actually changed the background color. We lightened it up quite a bit. Okay, we'll go back to another coat of yellow. Okay, I'll let that dry and I'll come back down with another blue. Okay, let's go with another layer of blue. Okay, we'll let that dry. You can see it's starting to go blue now, especially where I whited out the bird itself. I'm going to give it one more layer of blue, and then I think that might be it. I could give it one coat of white, maybe just up to here, just to lighten up the bottom just a little bit. But that I will wait and see how the blue goes. I can make it a little bit darker, take a gray back over it. It's just building up colors. It's whatever combination you want. They all overlap and they all make a difference because they're so transparent. I'm using the exact same color over and over, 3 or 4 coats. If you start staggering colors, then you're going to really get an optical mix of all the layers building up. But it depends on what end result you want. Okay, we're ready for another layer of blue. I'm going to try and mix and match the brush strokes. Okay, we'll let that dry. You can see how the blue is starting to build up, especially where I put the white over the egret. It's already back to decent blue, but it's just toned down a little bit because it's up against a gray background. Okay, well, the blue's dry, and I'm going to go ahead and start putting some more cream color down. This is the bronze yellow, and I'll also be using the unbleached titanium. Again, I have to build up layers just to duplicate the layers of the feathers. Okay, we'll let that dry. Okay, let's put another coat of blue down. I'm going to bring it down into about here this time. Okay, let that one dry. Many, many layers, but it does add complexity. Okay, I'm going to feather in a little bit more blue right in here and then give the entire area one more layer for sure. And then we'll figure out everything after that. Okay, we'll let that dry. That'll darken up a little bit. Okay, I dried that a little bit. We're on our last coat of blue, which should be. And we'll cross hatch the brush strokes. And again, that's why I like putting just a little bit on at a time. You can go back in and feather in the places that you might think need something, or even just a new color, but really small patches of color at a time. Very light. And again, this will have that painterly effect now, which I really like depending on how it's done. And you can see on the beak how much we changed it from just about a solid black. And I definitely like this end result far better than just a plain gray. It'll have more of a portrait theme to it. And again, I'm trying to glaze it so I eliminate any high brush strokes are like a real smooth finished surface. But that's just me. Okay, I'll let that dry good and we'll see what we got. Okay, I'm liking the way this is looking so far, but there's a little bit heavier blue here and here. And I'm going to try and feather in a little wee bit more right in here. just to see if I could do it. And this is the option you'll have when you work your gel real thin as far as gel to color goes. I'm going to put a little wee bit more in right in here, and that might be it. And then maybe a little bit more right here. But once it dries, it will change a little bit. Just to try and take out any heavy gobs. And again, I like a real smooth surface to finish up with. Feather it into my yellow. That might be it. We'll let that dry. I already went ahead and put my guidelines in for the feathers from our original transfer. I'll start the beak and start putting some highlights on it, but now it'll be safe darker because we made the background a good bit lighter than it was. Let's go ahead and let that dry. Okay, we're going to start working on the beak here. What I'll do is start roughing in my highlighted areas of just the different shapes of the beak itself. There's going to be a highlight on the top of the bottom beak that'll go the whole way out to the very edge itself. I'll mix my French ultramarine blue and the burnt umber to mix my blacks. I never use a straight black. It'll always be leaning a little bit towards blue or a little bit towards brown, but every now and then it will be a neutral gray. And then I'm also going to use my titanium white to start, and this is the thinned down version. So we could start that right now. We're going to put that highlight in. I'll just rough it in because I might have to change it a little bit. And just by applying different layers, different colors, will give us the complexity we'll need. I gotta take this all the way out to the point. I'm gonna go to a filbert. Okay, I gotta watch my colors here from the photograph that I'm using, only because it's extremely washed out, overexposed, and I might start to pick up noise and some different colors that may not necessarily be on that beak. Okay, let's take a look and see what we have. Just a real quick update. And what I want to do is I will start whitening out everything that's going to be a real strong pure white, but I have to white out enough to get rid of any kind of patterns that may come through my linear pattern. What I'll do is I'll drop down to smaller brushes fairly quickly, only to start my linear patterns the way they need to be for the feathers. Down in here, I'll start a linear pattern underneath and then build up with the real long plumes that are going to go over these darker colors. The plumes will obviously be lighter, but they'll still be a light gray. I'll save my whites for up in here and then up in here mainly, and then across the back and this one feather. Now there's a highlight right in here of the wing. I'll have to create that also, but right now I'm just blocking in the shapes. This is kind of like the kill the white stage, so to speak, where I'm just blocking everything in, but I'm slowly also building my textures and patterns while I do that. Let's go ahead and dive into some speed painting just to get some of this done. Right now I'm just blocking in the colors of the face and head just to establish my lightest lights and my darkest darks. The lightest light will be obviously the rim lighting around the bird. This is just to portray a bright white bird in bright white sunlight. Pretty much the entire bird is all a shadow. So what I will have to do is build my feather patterns and then glaze my warm and cool values over those feather patterns. I could create a subtle change in color throughout my feathers as I paint, or I could just lay down a layer of white feathers and then glaze over my warm and cool values on top of the pure white. Keep in mind, as I start the white feathers, they will darken as they dry. This is a glazing technique in itself, but it's a very good way to create very bright white feathers on one side of my pattern and slowly blend it into a shadowed side of the other side of that pattern. This is done by the brush and the amount of paint I have on it. When I first load up my brush, I will start brushing in the whitest white where I know it's going to be a strong value of white. Then as I run out of paint, then I will slowly blend that in to the background colors. These darker shadowed areas of the patterns I'm creating now are mostly going to be covered, but they are, again, an important step of building my feather patterns. Again, going with all of the whites, this is a very effective way of creating a feather pattern, starting with white and then going back over with my warm colors of brilliant orange, raw umber, yellow oxide, any of the warm colors I want to use in various areas throughout the bird. This will also call for cool colors in some areas of the bird, depending on whether it's a shadowed side or a illuminated side of an entirely shadowed area. Even though the bird is an entire shadow, it's still going to have lights and darks to represent the shapes on the shadowed side of the bird. Again, working with my whites, this takes a long time to build all of these feather patterns. I'm trying to establish feather patterns in the scale that they are for the size of the painting. I could render shapes of feathers by gobs of paint, but that's when it will look more like a painting than an actual bird. This is meant to be a realistic portrait of a snowy egret. Accuracy is my main goal, how it is in real life. This portrait has nothing else in the painting, just a straightforward shape of a bird, so I must keep all the interest within the bird itself. No other objects to pull your attention away from the bird, so it will be my job and my goal to create enough interest all within the bird. To keep that backlit effect, I'm going to warm up some of the crest feathers on the back of the head just to keep that backlit, illuminated portrayal of the feathers going. Now just working in some of the lighter areas, I subtly put in a very subtle shape of the back through the crest feathers just because they're semi-transparent. Let's take a look and see what we have. Okay, here's what we got done so far. Even some of the feathers that I know that I can make a super subtle feather that will stay there and will be considered completely finished. I won't have to go back to it. A lot of the other areas, I'm still on my way. These areas in here, I'll have to take the white feather patterns first, and then if you notice, if you watch real close, as I put the white down, it darkens as the water evaporates. And then I'll take my blue glazes back over it. Down in here, these are pretty well finished, but what I have to do is take a goldish glaze back over here to make it look like it's going back around, back into the shadowed side of the bird, but it's still illuminated from the rim lighting of the sun itself. This feather is hanging out into direct sunlight, So what I'll have to do there is finish it off and make sure that this right here is a pattern of the background feathers coming through. So I'll still have to give it another coat or two of pure white to make sure that I have no background patterns coming through my objects. That will make them look transparent when it shouldn't be. These textures here, I enlarged my reference just to show you some of these areas in here where there'll be a light blue highlight or even some warm colors. On a bright sunny day, you're going to have a lot of reflected light from objects that were around the bird, so I always keep that in mind. I knew what was around the bird, so it gives me a good idea what to expect on how to shade this bird. Some of these areas down here will be fairly subtle. It's almost like the typical portrait that could blend off into the background, but I'm not going to keep too much detail down here. I want everything to be up in here as far as detail and attention goes for the viewer. Let's go ahead and finish this up. We'll get it completely done and we'll get our final thoughts afterwards. When working with the acrylics, I like to work with my paints thinned out with a little bit of water and a little bit of matte medium. This makes the paints thin so they don't cover very well. However, they are very good for blending and making transitions from a light to dark area. It also works very effectively when you want to glaze a subtle color or a subtle value over what you already have. Again, these colors can be extremely subtle, but it works in the end to create depth in your painting. Working back and forth with lights and darks, it gives you the opportunity to build the painting as you see it happening. I often stray away from my reference knowing that there may be a color shift or something going on with the photograph that I would prefer the painting effect more than the photograph. Photographs will always look flat compared to a multi-layered traditional painting. If I think warm and cools work better, then that's what I'll do. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have. Okay, this is our snowy egret. I'm going to stop it here again as I do with all my paintings. I put them aside, look them over. I think I need to make the silhouette edge of the head a little wee bit darker just to define where the head is, and then this will be the translucent area of the crest itself where light could come through it, but you can't see through it. The feathers are a little bit too thick. And then some of the shadowed areas, they're doing okay. They might be dark enough now. And then the beak and the eye is pretty well there. The nostril is a little bit too bright. This is supposed to be a concaved area. Right now it's jumping out of me a little bit, but I want to be able to see it. It's just nostrils that you could, depending on the angle you look at it, you can actually see right through them, but it's just being backlit now. And then some of the grayer areas, I'm gonna leave them the way they are. And then also, this feather might need a little wee bit more white on the edge. There's like a ghost image of the back feathers. I don't want that. And then some of this might be able to go a little bit more pure white because it's a white bird in direct sunlight. And I don't have a problem of making this pure white with maybe a little bit of texture here and there. And that's what I did at the very end. Just put a couple of little feathers that were being just kind of like the light just kind of like glancing just across them and not nearly right at them. Some of these feathers are okay. I might be able to make them a little wee bit lighter, but again, I gotta be careful, then they'll be too light and they'll start to compete with how white this is and this. I have to tone them down, keep them toned down. This is all in a shadowed area, so I want to keep it looking that way. Now, this is the end of the snowy egret. I'll put it aside, finish it on my own, then I sign them. This is a completely different type of glazed background, many coats, but I really like the effect of what you could get with many coats of glazings, especially if you start mixing colors and then just let them build up. To see it on the painting itself is nothing like a printed piece or I even hate to say a digital piece. Digital, it's just like a photograph. No matter how many layers you create, no matter how much depth you try and create, when you print it out, it's a flat picture just like a photograph. Whereas a painting has built up physical layers that really show the difference when you see it. That is why when we were in school way back in the Art Institute of Pittsburgh days, our instructors used to always tell us to go to the museum and see actual work. It's a world of difference than a photograph in a magazine. With that said, I'm going to put up 2 paintings that I have. Those will be some of the next demos coming out. I might have 1 or 2 small ones before I get them done, but I have to get those done. They are on a deadline, and I'm going to even try and get a 3rd one done for that particular deadline. We'll put those at the end right after this, and they are just a bald eagle in a sycamore tree, a nest, new nest, and then also a painting of Maine. It will be of Schoodic Peninsula, and it's right at Schoodic Point. There'll be a couple of gulls, and then it's going to be a lot of granite and a real soft, foggy, stormy ocean. But they have a long way to go, but they are big. They are 30 by 48. So, with all that said, until I see you out in the field or back at the studio, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the whip work in progress.